Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of GameHammer Dailies. Today I want to do a very retro thing. We're going to have a look at Pong, the very first arcade game. Let's get straight into it. When the complete history of video games is eventually written, there will be an entire chapter devoted to Pong. Widely regarded as the first ever arcade game, which it wasn't, and we'll come to that in a moment, Pong revolutionised gaming through its sheer simplicity. Anyone could walk up to this game and instantly understand how to play it, and play it they did. First made available to the public at Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnydale, California in 1972, Pong was an instant success. In fact, it was so successful that Atari founder Nolan Bushnell once got a phone call from a Pong machine owner saying the machine had broken down due to overuse. When he arrived to fix the machine, he found it was in perfect working order. The only fault with it was that the coin slot couldn't take in any more money. Pong launched arcade games as a business, so much so that when people think of Pong, they usually think of it as the first arcade game, the game that started it all, but it's not. It's Atari's first arcade, yes, but it's not the first arcade game, and it's not Bushnell's first foray into commercial video games. That accolade goes to an arcade clone of the famous Space War game written for University minicomputers. Named Computer Space for its arcade debut, Bushnell created a version of Space War that could run in a standalone cabinet. This was the first arcade game. Bushnell manufactured 1,500 of these machines, so confident was he that the standalone machine version of the game that every university nerd was playing would be a success. It wasn't. Most bars wouldn't buy it. According to computer and video game magazines The Complete History of Video Games, which is no longer complete because time has moved on, most potential buyers were scared off by the thought of the arcade machine being stolen so that people could take the television out of it. But of the few machines that were sold, the reports back were that the people who tried it were put off by the range of options and the instruction screens. Bushnell interpreted this feedback very wisely. He went back to the drawing board and came up with the simplest game possible. 2 bats and a ball. A simple table tennis game. Everyone understands tennis. You hit a ball across a court and you try to get the ball past your opponent. If you manage it, you score a point. If your opponent hits the ball back at you, you have to hit it back at them, otherwise they score a point. It's simple to understand and very simple to play. So with his new game idea in mind, Nolan Bushnell teamed up with computer scientist Al Alcorn and electrical engineer Ted Dabney to form Atari, with Pong being their new company's first game. Bushnell directed, he knew what he wanted, but it was Alcorn who actually put the game together. Pong was an enormous success. The game is simple in its premise, but when you play it, you quickly find there's a lot of skill involved to master it. That's the core principle of an arcade hit. Simple to play, difficult to master. The key reason Pong is so tricky to get right is that the paddles don't move as quickly as you might expect. When I was a kid, I played on my dad's old grandstand Pong console. These were a big deal in the 70s and very early 80s. It was a chance to play Pong, plus a few variants on Pong if you had a higher end system, in your own home. On the grandstand, it was possible to make the paddles fly up and down the screen so fast that you would get motion blur. That's not possible in a true Pong arcade. The paddles move at a more sedate pace. This one simple fact changes the entire game. Now the game isn't a simple test of reflexes, it requires skill to know where to place your paddle, when to move it, and when to stay still. The ball also feels heavier on screen. It won't move all that quickly at first. It's not until the game is well underway and you've mastered the ability to sideswipe that little bouncing square that the pace of the game will increase. The paddles are also much smaller on Pong the arcade game than most of the home computer versions. This further increases the skill required as it's easy to overshoot or undershoot the ball. It takes time to master this game, which I have to admit I was not expecting. So there's a difficulty curve and there's also a skill curve, something that you might not expect from a simple arcade game like this. But when playing 2-player, that's when things get really interesting in that respect. A couple of skilled players could easily keep a game of Pong going for hours, but if you pitch a skilled Pong player against an amateur, the game is over in a few minutes. A Again, this is a very different situation to the Grandstand home version. On the home version, I could keep my dad, who had been playing this game literally since before I was born, from scoring simply by spinning the paddle as fast as I could. Try that in the real thing, and you won't last that long at all. Graphically, there's not a lot to write home about, but then again, what would you expect? Nolan Bushnell set out to create the simplest arcade game that he could, something easy to understand, and the on-screen graphics are part of that. The game is uncomplicated, both in its design and its execution. From a simple yellow case to the black and white screen, the game oozes simplicity. When you look at Pong, you know everything that you need to know. That's not to say there aren't faults to the game. My main concern is that the score sometimes gets in the way of gameplay. If you're the right-hand side player, you will find that your score is right next to your paddle when you move to the top of the screen, which makes it difficult to judge where to put the paddle to hit the ball at your opponent. The left side player is not so encumbered because their score is closer to the middle of the screen, so if you're having trouble with the game, play as the left-hand player, it might help. And I'm happy to say this was not replicated in the home computer versions, and I believe it's not on the Atari 2600, although I haven't got a copy of that to hand when I'm writing this particular script. The score was put more into the middle on the home versions, but on the arcade, this is a big issue. Each game of Pong stops when one player scores 11 points. This is in keeping with the rules of table tennis, which is what Pong is modelled after. The name is of course a contraction of ping pong. Getting to 11 points isn't easy if you're playing against a skilled player or if you're not a seasoned veteran and you're playing against the machine itself. That might surprise a few newcomers to the game, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. People aren't going to come back to play a game that they can defeat in one try. So there you have it, Pong, the first commercially successful arcade game, the game that put Atari, and by extension video games as a whole, on the map. There's a lot more to this simple old classic than you might first imagine. I was certainly pleasantly surprised when I played the real thing for the first time, compared to my time with the old clone Pong console at home. It's simple, yes, but what's here is great. It's one to play whether you're new to video games or a many years veteran. It might just pleasantly surprise you. It did me. So you are, surprisingly enough, Pong has a level of difficulty and a level of skill to it that I did not expect from a game of that era. I always played it as the little Pong console, the grandstand, the Binatone, that kind of thing. But wow, the original is actually quite good. Surprise, it's still got a little bit of something to it despite all this time. Anyway, that's all we've got time for today, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click that like button, share this too, so that your friends will know a good game when they see it, and do subscribe for future videos because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching GameHammer Dailies, I'll see you tomorrow.